Welcome folks. Now I understand I'm standing between everybody and lunch, so I won't drag this out particularly long. Obviously I'm Andy Hall, I'm the support manager. Most of you probably come across me in some guise or other, whether it's been a site visit or whether we've actually been fixing problems, or maybe in one of my previous incarnations elsewhere within the industry. So I won't dwell on that too much. What I'm going to do today is go over Nolan Cloud Services VAT submissions. So hopefully most of you already have some form of making tax digital VAT submission software in place, because if you haven't, you should have done by now, and HMRC will probably slap your wrists at some point. Hopefully you've actually got our solution. So this isn't a case of a demo of our solution. Buy this, this is great. This is more of a what's changed, what's happening, and what's the future, because obviously there's been some announcements by HMRC recently, etc. So just so that we keep abreast of everything that's happening with the product and making tax digital. Right. So what I'm going to cover, making tax digital, the current situation. So the situation as it stands vis-a-vis COVID-19 and some of the things that have changed. So we'll go into a little bit of that. Then we'll go into some of the new features we've put into Nolan Cloud Services. Now, most of our new features are as a response to client testing and client use. So we do value your feedback. If you have any great ideas, any suggestions for how we can make the product better, etc., please do get in touch. Talk to us in support. We'll flash it out with you, and we'll put those in as suggestions to our development team. That's how we make our products better, by listening to our clients and listening to the feedback. We can only go so far in thinking this stuff up. It's you guys at the sharp end that are using it on a daily basis. That's the kind of feedback we need to get our solutions absolutely singing. So we'll go over some of the new features. Then we'll go over what's next. That's something we get asked quite a lot. There's all sorts of rumours flying around about what HMRC are planning on doing with making tax digital. So we'll cover off a little bit of that, and then some useful HMRC info sites, etc. So without further ado, we'll go into making tax digital, the current situation. Well, it's all up in the air. So what should have happened is soft landing was due to end April 2020. But that, because of COVID-19 and of people working from home and all sorts of projects stopping, etc., has now been extended. They haven't said until when yet, so obviously they're looking at how their current situation pans out. So what does that mean for you? Well, the soft landing is basically the bit of the product that means you don't actually have to have a direct connection, i.e. in our case that was uploading it from an Excel spreadsheet. So this means you can still use the Excel spreadsheet upload for the time being. Just to explain what that is in HMRC terminology, etc. So if we look at this nice little diagram we've got here, obviously Dynamics GP down the bottom there, that's your ERP system. Over on the right hand side there we've got HMRC Customs and Revenue, and in the middle we've got Nolan's Cloud Services, our VAT submission. So what the whole idea of making tax digital was originally was there'd pretty much be a direct link from your finance system through your submission software into HMRC with no fiddling. So the idea is that all the details of your tax reporting is in your finance system and it gets pushed straight up to HMRC. So it's forcing you to account for everything electronically within your ERP system, and then no manual adjustments, etc. afterwards. What soft landing allows you to do was, as you see, I've got a little Excel symbol on the side there, is actually put it in a Excel spreadsheet or something like that, and then submit through your submission solution, in our case obviously Nolan Cloud Services, onto HMRC. So basically everyone's got a little bit of a get out of jail free card at the moment, in that we can still use that soft landing solution. So what should we be doing about this? Well, really, if you've not already thought about it, because we've got this extended period now, now's the perfect time to get all your ducks in a row and make sure you're in a position to move off of that Excel soft landing solution into the full-blown digital submission solution, i.e. this link from the VAT Daybook straight into VAT submissions and across to HMRC. Now, there are some caveats on that. So if we look at the different versions of Dynamics GP that are out there, obviously I haven't put the latest ones on here, 2018 and all that kind of stuff there in the 2016 and above, because the code hasn't really changed from that point onwards. So if you're on 2016, you've got no problems. 2018 or Dynamics GP as it is called now, so the latest iteration, hopefully most of you know by now, they've stopped numbering it after the years, and they've stopped that whole ongoing rollout process. They're moving more to the same sort of process they see with SaaS products, where you just have one version of the product and continual service packs rather than a major release coming out every couple of years and a forced upgrade. So if you're now looking at an upgrade, you'll be looking at upgrading to Dynamics GP rather than 2018 R2 or whatever. The actual physical number of it is 18.02, but that would be the latest release, and of course that's all in line with this. If we look further down, you'll see that there are some caveats here where we've got you can use bridging only if you're in those situations. So in 2015, that was a point if you're using Nolan's Advanced VAT. We changed the way our advanced VAT works. We used to have our own VAT 100 report in there to cope with all the reverse charging and all those lovely things that go on that GP didn't really cope with. In 2015, and we've changed the way we use Nolan's Advanced VAT, and it at that point started feeding directly into the TX30,000 table, which is used by the VAT Daybook. So we use the VAT Daybook report from that point onwards, and it's the VAT Daybook report that is the digital submission, i.e. our code literally sits on the back of that Daybook report and pushes the information up into Nolan's Cloud Services. So as long as you're using that VAT Daybook report, you're fine. So if you're in 2015 and you're using Nolan's Advanced VAT, you need to make sure that you're on the latest release of it, or you're going up to 2016, because it's then using that VAT Daybook. So that's something you're going to have to check to make sure you can move over to that fully digital solution. Also, if you're on 2015 and you're using the VAT 100 VAT return rather than the VAT Daybook, again you could only use the bridging solution, so you'd have to move across to the VAT Daybook report to be able to start submitting digitally. 2010, if you're as far back as that, same situation applies to those, and if you're on GP 10 or lower, well, the VAT Daybook doesn't really exist at that point anyway, so you're looking at, you're going to have to upgrade, because our solution working off the VAT Daybook won't go that far. If you were using the built-in Microsoft solution, you have to be on 2016 or above, and it's not as flexible. It doesn't work with VAT groups and other sort of situations, etc. So again, if you're using a VAT group in your submission, multiple companies and stuff, then you need to be on our solution and not on the Microsoft one. So these are things to bear in mind when you're thinking about moving away from your soft landing or bridging solution onto the digital solution. Basically, you need to be getting onto VAT Daybook as your form of VAT reporting, etc. So we'll have a quick look at some of these new features, etc., that are in the system now. So as I say, most of these have come from client feedback, etc. So we've got all sorts of new bits and pieces in the system. We've got two-factor authentication now. We've also got a re-authentication option. We found that tokens were being lost a little bit between HMRC sometimes, and they force a re-authentication. So we've made that easier to do, etc. We've got the abilities to add and remove companies now from GP, and it now only displays the added companies. You think, well, no, I've only got 2 or 3 companies. It wasn't a problem for me. We've had clients with 30, 40 companies in GP, and of course it displayed all the companies and you tick the ones you wanted, so that made for a huge, great, big, unwieldy list in our product. So we've changed the way that displays now, so it only displays the ones you've got ticked and you add and remove them. We've got updated submission receipts, so rules changed from HMRC about what had to be in the submission receipts and how those went through. So those have all been updated now, etc. We've now got sub-VAT entities as well. So again, this is feedback that's come from a client in that it's usual for most people to have a different company set up as a different database, etc. And if you're going to do a VAT grouping, we then combine those databases into one. We did have a couple of clients that went the other way, so they've got multiple companies that are all different VAT entities and aren't part of the same VAT group, all in one company in GP. So you can see how that's going to be a little bit awkward, because when you run the report, it's not going to be able to differentiate between that. So we've now come up with a way of doing that, so we can basically split all of those out and run those up into Nolan Cloud Services, another function you can't do with the standard digital submissions. Okay, you'll also see that new connector versions come out from us. So as HMRC change their requirements and require more information, every now and then you will see when you log in a little prompt updating you to change that connector. And again, that's because there's more information we now need to pull through for HMRC. So the impact to yourselves is very, very low. Most of these changes, you'd have just logged in one morning and they will be there. You don't have to do anything. It's just extra functionality you can now use. However, every now and then, if we're required to gather more data, we need to update the connector, etc. So that information comes through, and that will do that. And as part of the back of that, we've also split out the connector tasks. So whenever you reinstall the connector to GP, then of course you were forced to go through that entire install routine again and resubmit and everything like that. But we've now put in shortcuts to get to the different parts of that routine, so that if you only need to do one part of it, it makes it a lot simpler. So what we'll do is we'll quickly flick across into the product, and we'll show you some of these bits and pieces. Okay, so if we come across into my Dynamics GP, I'm just doing the old Microsoft Shuffle with Alt-Tab here. What we'll do is we'll start off with some of the bits we've got in Nolan's Cloud Services, and then I'll go into GP and I'll show you some of the bits and pieces in GP. When I go into GP as well, I will show you the things you need to check to make sure that you can start submitting digitally from GP if you're currently only using the bridging method as well, because there's 1 or 2 little bits you need to check to make sure you can do that. All right, so first things first, this is my Nolan Cloud Services. This is still a trial account because obviously I don't have a muck-about account with HMRC. They don't like you mucking about. So we'll sign in and we'll go in there and we'll go into the admin solution. Okay, so things that have changed in actual cloud services itself. As you can see, we've now got the ability to use two-factor authentication. It is working. We've got clients out there using it. do please keep the 10 emergency codes that it gives you when you set up two-factor authentication. When you set it up with your Google Authenticator or whatever, you get 10 codes it gives you that if it all goes wrong, you can use the codes instead of the two-factor authentication to get in. You need to keep those, because if you set up two-factor authentication, we can't disable it from our end. That's the whole point of two-factor authentication. It's got to be secure. So if you change mobile phones and things like that and it's not set up on the new one, you're going to need those codes, so make sure you keep those somewhere safe. We've had a couple of support calls on that already. Okay, and then as you can see, we've got the ability to have multiple access tokens and things in now. On the GP connector front, we'll notice that we've now got the latest versions of GP. So as I was saying, the latest release is now 18.02, which is what is Dynamics GP. So we're putting those in place on the system. If we go into the VAT submissions box, so we talked about some of the things. So we've now got a re-authentication option. Now it's not the most obvious, but you've got this three little blobs here in a little thing. So if you click on that, you have a re-authenticate option. You then click on that, and that will allow you to re-authenticate with HMRC. So the point when you originally set this up and you were putting in your government gateway details, etc., to be able to connect with HMRC, you've now got the option to re-authenticate that rather than having to go through it all through the back end and redoing it. You can do it there. That does help with one or two little issues we've had. I will say they were caused by HMRC. It wasn't to do with our software. But there you go. So that's the re-authentication option. The ability to add and remove companies. So we've got all sorts of things that have changed around the company entities. So if I go into my World Online entity, originally when we first did this, and if you look at the videos of this on our website, it's still the older version of this, you'll see that it displays every single company. As I said, if you've got like 30, 40 companies, that's an awful lot of companies. So we've now changed that, so you've got the ability to add in a company or remove a company. So you can add and remove the companies into an entity there, and only the companies that you've got on that entity will display here. So at this point, I haven't got any companies added in. I want to add one in. I'm literally coming in here. I can see my Fabricam, which is set up to my GP test company in here. So I can pick that and I can add that into my entity if I wanted to do so. And obviously while we're in this window, when we're talking about changing over to the financial data from the bridging solution, it's very simple in the software itself. It's literally a point of you don't have to set up a new entity or anything like that. You can use your existing entity, and if you're using the soft landing at the moment, you're using this Excel file option. It's just a matter of switching it over to this financial software data option, and it will then be talking to GP. As long as you've got the connector in on GP and you've got that daybook set up, which we'll go into in a bit when we go into the GP side. We'll have a look around all of that. Okay. So also with the financial companies, we've got the ability to drop them out, etc. And we talked about enabling sub-VAT entities as well. So that's this function up here. This is that new function, so we can create multiple VAT entities out of one report, because you have one VAT daybook report coming up because you have multiple companies in one database in GP and they're not a VAT group. So fairly unique set of circumstances, but we do have at least 2 clients that went down that route. So we've responded in kind with that. Okay, I can't show you updated submission receipts and stuff. That's just stuff happening behind the scenes, although you'll have noticed the message changed slightly. And what we'll do is we'll go into GP now and we'll have a look at some of these connector tasks. So, right, across to my Microsoft Dynamics GP, here we go. So, when we talked about we've added connector in, normally you used to have to get to the collector by going over to Home, and you should have, mine's being very slow. Right, so you should have your GP come up and your Nolan stuff there, and this is the beauty of live demonstrations. It's probably because it's been sitting quietly for a while. So I'm going to use that good old support technique. Oh no, I don't need to. I was going to switch it off and switch it on again. As you know, that fixes 90% of problems, but it seems to have brought itself back to life, so that's fine. So as I was saying, ordinarily on your home bar, you've got the Nolan Business Solutions bit here, and here's the service connector. So getting the connector onto the machine is really simple. As you saw, when we were in Nolan Cloud Services, there was that ERP connector thing, and there was a download option just about below it. You literally download it from there, and on that web screen, there's loads of screenshots and instructions. You just download it, and it needs to go on the client machine that you're going to be using to submit your tax returns to HMRC. It doesn't have to go onto every machine in the office. Not everyone's going to be doing it. Possibly you don't want it on every machine in the office. If you're using terminal services, obviously it needs to be on that terminal server. But you get the connector onto the machine and you just run through the install routine. It's a pretty much next bit. You do need to put in your connector, your ID and your token, but that is in the instructions. So the instructions are dynamic on the Nolan Cloud Services website. So where it says put in your token ID and instructions and token, that is actually your token ID and token. It's not a random sample one that is put in the instructions. The instructions are dynamic, and that is your ID and your token in there. So you put that on, and then you're coming in here and you're running through this install routine on here, which is pretty much next. When connectors update, you'll get a message when you log in saying you need to update your connector. You literally just download the next version, and you can go through that routine again. Or if you need to do specific parts of that routine, as we said, you can now get to those within bits that we've broken out into different parts of GP. I really don't know why my machine's being so slow. It was as fast as you like earlier. I'll tell you what, I will just, oh no, here we go. So as we go into there, we've got the Nolan services under administration, routines, Nolan services, and again, this was a response to clients saying we didn't want to have to go through the whole install routine every time. You can get to the different parts of the VAT submission setup now within GP, as they've all been broken out. So you can get to the part where updating tokens, so you can create new tokens if you need to and stuff like that. You can come in here and put them in rather than having to go through the whole routine. Okay. Etc. And you can go through all the individual bits. So into the company, so if you want to add in, you didn't have all your companies set up originally, you can now go in and select the extra companies, deselect companies, etc. So you've got access all around having to go throughout that whole routine all the time. Okay, so the connector itself is really simple. That's pretty much all you need to do to get it on the system. And that's pretty much all you see of the Nolan Cloud Services VAT submission in GP when you're setting it up and when you're using it. Okay? As I said before, the code sits behind the VAT daybook report. So you need to make sure that you are using the VAT daybook report, which is, I believe, tools, setup, system. Yeah, use VAT daybook report, and you come down here. That needs to be ticked to start with to make sure you're using the VAT daybook report as your form of reporting. The other thing you need to do is, with VAT daybook reports, is have a report set up. Obviously, that's a different thing. But if I select my GP one here, so this is a GB one, obviously you need to have one set up as default, but it needs to have a GB country code and using the GB template. If it's not using those, the code doesn't pick it up because it doesn't know it's basically a UK VAT return, and then won't submit it up to HMRC. Literally all you need to do is run your VAT daybook report. When you run the final audit of the report, our code kicks off and pushes it straight up to Nolan Cloud Services, and you will then see the data in there in the same way as if you just imported it using the soft landing Excel method. Okay. So I think the things to take away from this is, if you are not already using the digital method, putting the information up there with a link, is you need to come away, have a look in your GP system and check and see if you are using VAT daybook reports you set up to use those, and then B, are you using the GP templates and stuff. C, get the connector on. Once the connector's on, it's on there. Now the good thing is, when I showed you the swap in the entity, you can continue using both. Okay, so if you're not happy with the information coming out of your VAT daybook report at the moment, you can concurrently continue using the soft landing Excel submission method, but run this in parallel until you're happy with it, and then we just flick over. So it will continue to submit data up to Nolan Cloud Services, and it will keep it there, but you don't have to use it. It can stay there, and you can continue to submit by Excel spreadsheets until you're happy with it. But obviously the clock is ticking. We've had a reprieve in terms of time frames, but we do need to be looking at getting everyone across to the VAT daybook report and submitting it digitally. Okie dokie. Right. Back to PowerPoint. So what's next? This is something we get asked a lot. So there's a lot of rumours that circulate about making tax digital out there. There is actually on the HMRC website, there is a fact or fiction section that debunks the rumours that are circulating around there out there. We are actually within their kind of development inner circle. So we're a trusted provider with HMRC. So we are actually in constant contact with them. There's a lot of information flying backwards and forwards between us and them about requirements as they change and what the future holds, etc. And as you may have seen, your connectors change and things like that as we change along with it. Most of this isn't going to affect you. Obviously the big one that everyone worries about is at some point in time they're not just going to want the summary information. So the information that goes up there tends to be the 9 boxes at the moment. It's just the summary information. That's what goes up to HMRC. And the big one that everyone talks about is they're going to want the full detailed information at some point in time. Well, that's not yet. They haven't set a date for it. They vaguely hinted at it, but there is nothing set in stone. However, as I said, we are communicating with them regularly. We are going to be one of the first to know when that requirement becomes a reality. And that is one of the reasons why we have structured the product the way we have structured it. We've been forward-looking on this, and one of the reasons we used the VAT daybook report, because it does allow you to bring through that level of detail. So it's going to be a minor configuration change to our connector to be able to accept that and push that up. So for the time being, yes, that's not a requirement. If it becomes one in the future, we are perfectly placed to push that through, but it isn't at the moment, and it will be with the minimum amount of disruption to you in the product. And it's not going to be something we're going to charge extra for. You pay your £250 per year per entity, and that's it. So all the changes as they come across from HMRC and they change the requirements, we put those in the products. We'll make it as nice and as simple for you as possible. So that's kind of really it on the what's next front. As I say, there's everything's on hold with COVID-19 from HMRC. So a lot of stuff is being put on hold, and there isn't any really strong dates or anything like that coming through at the moment, but we'll be one of the first to know when things do change, and we will inform all of you and help you along that journey wherever possible. So that's what's happening next. Useful HMRC sites. So there is one site we go to a lot, which is this one, which is basically the service availability and issues. So wherever we become aware of them, we'll put notifications in our product when you log in. But I would say probably about 80% of the cloud services support calls I've dealt with where people are having problems submitting, I've gone into our back end and checked the error messages coming back from HMRC to then go and check on this website here to find out that they've taken the service down for whatever reason on the touch of a dime. So that's actually a good site to keep hold of when you're having issues submitting. More importantly, it's a very good site to check when you're planning on submitting your tax. So if you know that you're planning on submitting tax this month, at the start of the month, check that site, because they do have scheduled and planned downtime most months of the submission system at their end, and unfortunately it tends to be down for a couple of days at a time, and they do it during working hours, not over the weekends very often. So it's worth checking there, because we've had several very frustrated people that are trying to submit their VAT at the last minute, and actually HMRC's down for planned maintenance. So it's a good tip to go and have a look there before planning when you're going to submit your tax that month. You may end up having to do it early because of planned maintenance on their side. So that's pretty much it. It's a whistle-stop tour. As I say, hopefully you've all got some kind of Making Tax Digital solution already in place. If you haven't, by all means, get in touch with us. If you are using ours and you're still on that soft landing Excel submission method, we really need to be thinking about getting across to the digital method. There are some things there for you to go and check on and get back to the system. Make sure you're using those VAT day books. And pretty much if you're with us, the future is covered. We are in constant contact with HMRC, and we will be one of the first to know as these things change, and we will make that as seamlessly for you as possible. And last but not least, if you do have any feedback about the product, things that you would think would be a great addition to it, or even into GP itself to help with the whole tax submission stuff, by all means let us know.